Hey, Zombroz fans, Morales and Twice I'm back here for another wonderful week of Zombroz action. But I think we have a very, very special guest this week. Something that kind of blew our minds out of the excitement field. And what perfect timing with DLC 2. But first, before we introduce our absolutely wonderful and exciting guest, we have our co-host as well, Johnny. How you doing, Johnny J?
I'm doing well, Reed, but don't spend any time on me. Let's focus on the more
Very
important
good. Quinn,
people.
how you doing? Good?
I'm good. Move along.
Okay, so let's, while we're all here, and probably most of the viewers too, I'd love to introduce the director of zombies at Sledgehammer Studios, Cameron Dayton. How you doing?
Doing really great. Thank you so much for the invite, man.
Absolutely. I'm so happy we can have you on the show. The community has been very, very excited and had a wonderful reception to the Shadowed Throne so far, which I'm sure from the studio side is very, very good feeling to be able to have such a warm reception to this DLC. But we have so many questions we want to ask you, and we're just kind of going to let it flow today. So I know everyone in the community is dying to try and get some insight, but first off, what was it like to be, like, we were kind of almost getting into it as well on the beforehand here, but on launch day, what is it like inside the studio? Like, can you take us through a standard DLC launch day at Sledgehammer Games?
Oh yeah, it is probably one of the most exciting moments in the entire process. I mean, sure, you've got the moments of innovative thought and when a new idea comes through, but nothing compares to the countdown to when the game is up and when it's live, and seeing the faces, seeing the expressions. And so we've got up in our kind of lunchroom area a bunch of big screen TVs, and we will have each of them kind of tuned in to various streams, various streams playing through, and gathered around, and people just nervously eating, and so much care and thought and just long hours and late nights have been put into every little detail. I mean, you would not believe the debates that go in over, how dark does the blood need to be in the pools of the street, and is this cool? Is this interesting? Is this offensive? And to get these little delightful moments as you guys play through, and the cries of horror and surprise, and well, that was kind of lame. There is all noted and responded to with emotional response, and we're in there. I mean, don't take this wrong, we're generally cheering for the zombies as because every time the zombies take you down, it pushes back that solution moment of when the Easter eggs go on, and it means we've been able to kind of either cleverly set up a moment where they'll have a player trap, or where you will be so invested in solving an Easter egg that you're not thinking about those damn whistlings piling up behind you, sort of thing. So
yep, very much so. Well, that's so cool. With that said, during launch, do you guys ever do like what Treyarch Studios has done? Do you take bets on how long it's going to be until the Easter egg solved?
Yes, we do. Yes,
awesome.
We do. And it's hard for me as a creative director. I'm the optimistic guy, right? I'm the cheerleader, and so there's always this debate of like, should I be optimistic for our clever hiding of things, or should I be optimistic for you clever bastards out there trying to solve this, this sort of thing? So I will often overshoot what's usually gonna happen. But there were a couple folks that were spot on, almost to the half hour when this was going to be happening. So
dang,
yeah,
that's pretty darn good.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when we were doing it yesterday, the hardest part for us though was just the safe. I think me, Reed, and Quinn yesterday were at that safe for maybe like 20, 30 minutes. We're like, oh no, we passed the number, or no, you got to go two times over.
Yeah. See, the safe is what gave me a lot of hope, actually, because we in all of our testing, everything ground down once everyone. Okay, the safe is what's left, guys. All right, and so how do we do the safe? And I think people used to be a lot more familiar with the left-right dynamic of the safe sort of thing, and so I was just delighted. I'm like, well, they don't even need to know to go all the way around for the next one.
You didn't even have to think of that one.
And,
it did the work itself.
Again, you folks, and by you I mean the community in general. One of my favorite things is is the communication happens. Like
Mhm.
you know, people are calling in and saying, "Hey, no, I'm watching the stream over here. This is what's going on," and it's such a fascinating example of. I mean, I know there tends to be a negative term, the idea of groupthink or you know, communal thought. But it goes to show how brilliant it can be. The more you know neurons you get firing at a target like that. So
Yeah, I think that's so difficult too. I think I've even heard Jason talk about that in the past about groupthink, because it's just like you're trying to create a fun puzzle for us, but all of a sudden, like in the past, maybe we had 10,000 people, but now like live, it's like a scheduled event on our calendar. Like, all right, about 500,000 people today are going to try and solve this thing, this problem you've been trying to put together for like a month or two. Well, more than that, but it's just like. Please last more than a day.
Now, when you're creating an Easter egg, how many people would you say have input on the steps?
You know what? The way that I try to organize the creative thought and what we do is we've got the core beats of first of all of the entire franchise over the season, and then of what's going to be happening inside each of these levels. And those are usually planned out months and months in advance, and we've got some kind of grand scheme of how, the idea in the Final Reich, the idea of using paintings and the art as as clues and everything else like that. But I always like to encourage kind of those unique eureka moments of creativity as well. And some of the most brilliant elements usually come from some designer who was up till 3 a.m. and just high off his gourd on Doritos and Mountain Dew, and it's like perfect. I know we've got the Hangman Puzzle was something Lucas, one of our brilliant designers, just came up with, and he's like, Cameron, I think I'm gonna put Hangman in there. I was like, how is that even gonna work? And he just kind of giggled and rubbed his hands. And the fun thing is, a lot of times you don't see these things until we're in and doing kind of the play test, and he'll drop a little clue like, why don't you shoot some bullets up at the marquee right there? Oh wow, okay. This is good, and I think sometimes you've got kind of the group strivings towards collective, there we go again with this term, creativity, but yeah, I try to encourage those individual genius moments as well. That's where we get some of the best stuff.
I think that's great, because things like Hangman, at least for me, are what make maps memorable. Like little things like that you don't find anywhere else, just really make the map stick out.
Well, Quinn,
I'll remember that. Figuring out it was Hangman.
You disappeared last night for like 10 minutes. Next thing you know, you come back and you got to do like me reading started doing the steps, and you just come back with the wonder weapons. Like, what's good, guys? What I miss?
When that eureka moment, Lex and Quinn here, they start looking at it. I'm screwing around with the safe because everyone thinks they know the correct number. They didn't know the method yet. I'm like, all right, I'll try it out. I'm exhausted. And you just hear Lex and Quinn, they're like, oh, shoot. And also they, it's Hangman, and they're freaking out. Oh my God, it's Hangman! It's just like, it's such a good feeling, and like that's almost something I think over time what I've seen in maps, when you see those little details that show up, it's just like that is what ends up sticking with players, because it's that experience that isn't somebody has gone online and already ruined something for us, or just it's just like, oh, I know it's already going to happen because of whatever reason. It's those little things you create with friends that seem to really connect well in this game mode.
Remember last night when we lured you into the woman jump scare, and you freaked out?
Yeah, dude, that was so good. Okay, so two instances. The people that complete the Easter eggs were nice enough not to surprise me or ruin the stuff, because I always try and go in blind, because I think I enjoy stuff the most that way. And when we're doing the smuggler step, that was fantastic, because you even have, to me, I love how there's like an isolated story. You have a narrative now of this guy going through the sewers, and like, is he going to make it out as well? Something I very much liked in the previous map from Treyarch in comparison to Shangri-La. That whole storytelling aspect of that map is contained in one map. Now, transition here, we have this guy, like, oh, we're giving him weapons, he's fighting through, we're getting points, and then you're like, it was almost like I was a paid advertisement, because I'm with Star. I'm like, does this guy make it out? Door gets kicked down, all the zombies come out. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. That's on you.
Well,
so nice.
Well, first of all, I'm sure I've seen plenty of Twitter accusations that this is a paid advertisement. So thank you, gentlemen. A lot of that comes from well, first of all, to get to the I had 2 points there. The Hangman was, Lucas came up with this idea that was so great, but we've got kind of this data cloud of different things that we want to have happening, and sometimes this list will spill over from level to level. One of the things that was sitting there was like, I like consistency from level to level, and how the lessons learned in level 1 can be seen in level 2, and will spill over to level 3. And one thing that's always bugged me is like, okay, if we've had the technology to MacGyver together some amazing new wonder weapon, why are we not using that in the subsequent levels? And so that was one of the marks, was like, can we have those past wonder weapons available again? And can we have? I tried to have a little of that in the Darkest Shore. The idea was the core of the Ripsaw was built out of the fusion gun. They had a crate of fusion guns, and that had originally been a little bit more of a story that this it was going to be one of the crates on the shore was going to be knocked over, was going to have some Tesla guns. Tesla guns.
Oh, that would have been
nice.
And and you can still see the DNA of that in the core and the stock that you pick up. And then on this one, it's like, okay, but I still want to have, in Berlin, I want to have some evidence of that here. And the Hangman way was just, we're like, oh, well, why don't we just have them essentially order them, from Amazon by using the billboard. And then okay, so what was the next thing you talked about after that? The elements of storytelling.
The smuggler.
Yeah. As we, up until now, every element of story in our game has been deliberately hidden within the shadows of actual history. While we invented the town of Middleburg, we made sure that it was calendarically proper for where it was happening in the war and why it was happening there. And even kind of played with the idea of, well, could it have possibly been an actual city that was wiped off the map by the Germans after things went south with that? Heligoland was again an amazing find where I was already reading into, okay, what are some great places of Nazi interest for the Ahnenerbe, where they had these ideas of lore, of Atlantis, of the Aryan race, and where the superiority was archaeologically proven, I guess. And and I'm reading, I'm like, okay, boom, they've got this legend, they've got the worship of Nerthus, there was a Nazi naval base there, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this place was bombed to hell right at the tail end. I'm like, we just came up with the reason, and nobody knows why it was. I mean, it was, apart from there was a naval base, but it was and I think I might have mentioned this to you before, it was the...
Oh no.
Did he cut out right when he's about to say something?
I think so.
Oh,
for a minute there, I thought my whole thing broke, because I think we were all just watching.
It was so intense. She had us right there.
Yeah, I was hooked.
Oh, damn it! You had us. You locked in. We were all like,
yeah.
Oh, cut out the perfect time.
The worst part is I went on for blabbering easily like
no.
And, no, and probably said things that our PR and marketing people would have been shooting me for anyway. So
great.
Well, you can't leave us on that cliffhanger too long though. You mentioned something about it. What was it? The Darkest Shore, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and the funny thing is, I was like, wow, these guys are really wrapped up in what I'm saying. Their faces aren't even moving. And it was, because of the cat. Okay, so I was talking about using, we've got this cloud of a list of the things that like.
Oh no.
See, like, appearing in some point, if we can fit them in. And yeah, as Lucas came up with this idea for the Hangman thing, was like, oh, this is a perfect way to be able to bring in, the past wonder weapons, the Ripsaw, the Tesla gun, and to be able to, drop these other prizes in there. And then after that, we started talking about the progression of the story, right?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm kind of catching myself back.
No, you're good. We are too.
This is going to be fun for you guys to edit, isn't it?
Yes.
So yeah, getting into the kind of the shadow of history, where everything that we've been writing up until now has been very tied to what we've been discovering about these locations. Heligoland, I think I got into my surprise and delight about finding the this amazing island that was checked off a lot of the boxes for what we're looking at. We had a couple locations. I mean, those the Nazi secretive base list is extensive, and all sorts of interesting places where they could have gone and where they were looking into. And yeah, as I was going through Heligoland, we found out, well, yeah, and then end of April, the place got bombed to hell, and I was like, oh, perfect. Now we've just given the reason for why this can happen. So in that vein, when we started looking into, like, you know, this map, we are stepping out of the shadow of history, and we're going to come right onto the front stage, you know, and we're going to really take that first shift into, okay, this is not something that could have happened and we missed it. This is where we're shifting into, we're taking history in an alternate course, you know. And so, of course, what is the single most significant and driving and impactful moment? Well, it's that long drive of the Red Army into Berlin, and you know, bombing one of the world's most ancient cities, and the horrors that went on there. You know, that was one of the themes that we wanted to focus on in this, were really is the horrors of war. And my team can tell you, like, I kind of go off on the Nazi zombie concept as a way for us to explore those horrors in a way that is, okay, we're in a fictitious setting, obviously, and we've got the you know, these undead warriors. It's obviously, there's an element of imaginative, you know, fantasy going on here.
Of course.
It kind of opens up the possibility of talking about the atrocities that did go on, things that were more horrific than Walking Dead soldiers. And as we went into Berlin, we've got a fantastic historian who's kind of our on-call expert on what's going on. His name is Marty Morgan, and you've seen him on some of the interviews with the single player side. He has been an incredible ally on the zombie side as well. And I can remember first approaching him and being like, okay, we're doing some silly stuff here. I mean, this is not as, you know, but he, you know, as a historian, as somebody who is tied to the things that happen, he was the first to say, he said, Cameron, there are a lot of things that we still don't know, that we have clues towards, that we don't know exactly what the Nazis were exploring or doing. And it is in seeing what a full-on certified historian has said, that's a big question mark. I'm like, oh, that's delicious stories.
Yes. That gives you room to run and work with.
Exactly. Because I think the best stories are the ones that where you lock them into what is actual as much as you can, and you find out what has not been answered, and that's where you can have some imaginative fun. I mean, that we do that with Barbarossa, and there's a reason why we picked him as well. But so with Berlin, you know, I had emailed him about, this is where we kind of want to go, and we're going to say, you know, what would have happened if the Nazis had this power of these undead soldiers, and there was that final call. We're towards the end of the war. The leaders of the SS put out a call saying, it is now or never. You need to come in and save us. And I had a hint towards that in Darkest Shore.
That was in the radios, right?
Yeah. And there, you guys, and it was one of those things where, as we talked about the nightmares that went on in Berlin, as this tired and very this furious army from Russia marches into the stronghold of this, you know, regime, and you've got stories that I mean, they will take your breath away for what went on. And so we're like, okay, well, now what happens if we drop a bunch of zombies into there? And so it became a very, out of what was already kind of an interesting journey into the imaginative exploration of the horrors of war, that became one of the strong themes of what we were doing. And I think one of our two art directors that kind of moved in on this project. We had Lawrence and Sandy, and Sandy was the first to say, why don't we push something that teases out the 7 deadly sins? And so I don't know if that's something you'll notice going through, but it might be something interesting to keep your eyes open for. How are those representative of the map? And this is less of an Easter egg and more of a visual thematic sort of a thing.
Yes.
We looked a lot at the film Seven. Played a big role in what we're doing. I think Seven is interesting as it's kind of a film noir, but it's very colorful. And you look at any of the scenes as the as the detectives are moving through the rooms of evidence and everything else. It's disturbingly bright and colorful, and it's still in its own noir, dark sort of way.
Right.
It's all about that paradox, right? And so we wanted to have some of that in this in this level as well, because while Middleburg had that sharp contrast between the very almost charming, picturesque, snowy village and the horrors going on underneath, Heligoland, we just like, okay, this is just horror from top to bottom, In Berlin, we wanted to showcase, like, this was a city that up until literally hours before the player arrived was a normal, bustling city. And we had a lot of fun playing with why would there be blitz machines, and why would there be these elements, these gun boxes? And Sam Howells and his crew did such a brilliant job of like making them look like they were dropped in from these same drop pods. The tactics would be here that, as a zombie movie army advances, the Nazis would be dropping in the elements that would allow their own soldiers to be able to control the undead and to push them from behind, sort of thing. And so it's that advantage that our soldiers have learned how to tap into with their own electroschnell devices. So
I love that. Like I noticed it when I played the map that like the boxes just aren't in the right place. Like you'll play a Treyarch map and they're neatly squarely on the wall. They're level with it. But it's on the ground or it's tilted. I didn't even think about that. I love that.
Yep. That was a good one. The STG we saw in one place as well. It's a testament to the atmosphere that your team seems to be so exceptional at making for these maps. You continue to nail atmosphere. Yesterday, last night, I was saying it in our games and the night before too. Just like we're seeing people dead here. Like we don't see that. When people
you'd walk into a room, you'd hear screaming, and you'd see a zombie attacking a live person. Like my first thought when I saw it, I ran over and I killed the zombie, and it was too late.
And
we never have seen that in zombies before.
That was another thing that I my list of I would really like to see this at some point in some map, and it was one of those, it was like number 15 on a list of 20. But as we got into Berlin, we're like, oh, this is the perfect place to show this. This is the perfect place to show this, and because right here, this is a map where you've got civilians fleeing in every way they can. You've got the Russian soldiers moving in, and and it wasn't this clean line as they moved in. We had artillery going off and certain groups getting in ahead of other groups, and I wanted to really communicate the sense of urgency that our four heroes have as they're seeing the front line of what was supposed to be an unstoppable force marching through the city, getting the first signs of them getting pushed back, and the urgency of we've got to let them know. I think that's one of Jefferson's lines, saying the Ruskies don't know what's going to hit them, and it's the first sign of what's. And I think I can safely say what's going to be a sea change in the war and in our game and what we're going to be showing you.
Oh man, it's not fair. You're totally killing me here because me and my buddy will just talk history for hours. We'll be laughing about like caricatures of these leaders in the past too. Oh God, this is great.
I want to say though, I do love though how you grounded it in history, in like because like when we were playing the Darkest Shore, and like I realized they're like, oh no, we're not gonna go do Operation Sea Lion. We need to go to Berlin. The Fuhrer like is demanding our help. And then I'm thinking about 1945. Holy crap, we're going to the Battle of Berlin. And then I'm like, oh, this is just amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I love that.
Well, and you want to know, and I can safely say this now because we didn't go. The reason why there's a little bit of that regret of not doing Operation Sea Lion is because that's what we were going to do. That was really the debate. Is like, oh, do we head on? Do we have like the Tower of London with a Panzer mortar stomping through the bricks, and do we have, or do we take it right to the heart, again, to the throne? And that was the idea. It was like, I just love the idea of that moment, and so many stories and films have been written about what would have happened if we'd been able to get in and change things. And I mean, the idea of kind of alternate World War II history stuff has been written time, and you've seen Man in the High Castle, and so this is a little bit of our kind of homage to that genre. And while stomping into London would have been fascinating, and it's not entirely off the list for the future, this felt like, again, it is World War II is our theme here, and it's funny, we've been attacked for sticking to that theme. We've been attacked for being consistent on that focus, but kind of to keep the, and this is odd to say, the purity of the narrative. We've sometimes avoided going to what might have been a loopier, more exotic location to stay true to the kind of beating heart of what the story is supposed to be about.
That's fascinating. That's really cool to hear. Now, I know, John or Quinn, you had a question about voice actors we could transition to here, because there's a couple really good points we saw made on Reddit as well.
Well, one of the things I was wondering is, when you guys decided to bring on like Ving Rhames and those people to be the voices of your characters, what was the decision making like? Why them?
Well, we went through the characters that we wanted to have. I had written out these characters. I had little kind of paragraph breakdowns. And we've got an incredible casting director, Ivy Iverson, who can make any name you want. She can bring it up to bear. And it's funny because it used to be we kind of had to scrounge as video game developers for anybody who wouldn't be who would take the knock on their career by doing game stuff, and that has been so different nowadays. It's like I mentioned earlier, Ving Rhames does not play video games and is kind of unfamiliar with the genre. However, when his kids heard that Call of Duty was asking, he didn't have any option. He had to put down the script from Arby's and come talk to us about Jefferson Bots.
That's awesome.
That's pretty.
And so we had a list about 5 to 10 long for each character. That could have been interesting and different, but invariably people have their schedules that's not going to work. We will do reads with them, and we'll either kind of not lock in, will not feel like this is the exact right thing. And the way our cast came together was miraculous. There was this immediate sense of like, oh, these guys would get along. There's an immediate sense of, I could see not only the parts where they connect, but the really interesting points of friction where what drives them. I'm not sure if you guys remember from our Comic-Con discussion, but Elodie Young mentioned that her family actually did have kind of a dark history with the Nazis as they rolled into Paris, and that is something that I had written into her character. But we did not know this when we brought her in. It was literally as I was recording the VO with her that she stopped and got a little emotional about it. And I was, okay, this is perfect. And so that means
yes, please cry. He's perfect.
Isn't that horrible? Isn't that horrible?
Zoom in.
It is, but it makes for a great game.
I was like, how dark and tragic! Hooray! And then having the way that gives her a different focus into what's going on here, versus Marie, who as heroic as she is, her journey is a little more selfish. It's a little more personal. It's about my brother and going in and solving my own issues, whereas as Olivia is there as a much more for the philosophy behind it, this idea of the horrors that the Nazis are bringing onto her people, even though she has just as personal a grudge against them She's much more of a big picture sort of person, and you see that in her dialogue. It's all about what the Nazis have done to us as a people, and so that sets us up for some nice points of friction. You see the first cracks in the wall in that first scene in Darkest Shore.
Yeah.
Is it right in there?
And yeah, so those are fun things to explore. And yeah, each of the characters, I've told them I want them to, or each of the actors, I want them to own these characters. And there have been times where they've, kind of run through a line a couple times, and it was just like, you know what, that was me being writerly, and I don't know if that's exactly what Jefferson would say. Then what would you say if you were this sort of thing? And that has happened. And when we do this, it drives our sound team and our locus team nuts because we've already gotten this approved in Saudi Arabia, man. I don't know why you think you're going to be able to switch this rollout, but they've been really awesome being able to kind of be flexible and say, yeah, I'm sorry, this is just not what Olivia would say, not what Catherine Winnick has really grown to love her character.
That's so cool.
And
I love it.
She has actually come in with notes that she's put together for.
That's awesome.
How things would happen, and she's busy with Vikings. I think she just directed an episode, and
wow.
loves the idea of, and it's her character is not too dissimilar from her Lagertha character in Vikings, which is uniquely anachronistic leader sort of character for the time, for at least what we're familiar with. And that's something that it means that we've created this fantastic alchemy between their actual personality, the character on screen, and what they'll be developing into.
Oh, did you write any of the characters with like a specific actor or actress in mind?
Yeah, I think I can say this safely now. My original plan for Marie was Gwendolyn Christie.
That would have been great too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I mean, she was. First of all, I've been a huge George R.R. Martin fan since. I'm gonna be like hipster geek on here. I'm like back when the books were little known and had horrible art on the covers.
Of course.
And and so the Brienne of Tarth character I always thought was interesting as a. If this had been written as a male character, would have been the classic kind of hero's journey. But because she's female, what does that bring into the story? And unfortunately, it was a schedule thing, didn't work out. And then somebody threw out Catherine's name, and I was like, you know what? I don't know how that would work because. Her look is a little bit different, and
of course.
She brings in some of those other elements. And then we had her do a read, and it was just so spot on, and it was her own excitement for that was really exciting as well.
Oh my God!
Gwendolyn Christie is fantastic as a voice actress too. She voiced her own character in Battlefront 2, and she has some of the best work in the game. I mean, it's perfect.
So, but again, it was kind of one. The Bob Ross term, like a happy accident, where we ended up with somebody that was not in the original plan, but I think has entirely owned and redefined what that character is and what she's become.
Definitely, she's definitely one of the most beloved characters on the whole team. I mean, you see quite a fun battle between all the characters, and that's the good news. When everyone's fighting over who's their favorite, that's great that everyone's talking that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, there was a lot of interest in her response at the very end of Final Right, and how she, falls to her knees with tears in her eyes, and the fact that registered for the community in such a way, and I saw folks saying, I've never seen this sort of thing in a zombie story.
We were vocal. We were vocal about the characterization.
Iconic moment in the map.
That's right. But here's the thing: if you didn't care about her character, if you didn't care about why she was there, that would have just sailed by. But the fact that there was the response, positive and negative, to her reaction like that, for me, it felt like we had won as far as creating a fully three-dimensional character.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Oh, I love it. with all the positivity, I'm sure some people now are like, all right, that's enough. That's enough.
Right.
Asking some hard questions here. So
The softballs are over.
Debatably hard questions here, but the number one question on Reddit that was very people really wanted this asked, and let me get it verbatim at this point, but the Redditor says, it is plain to see that World War II Zombies was made with cooperative play in mind. As it stands right now, solo Easter eggs are ridiculously difficult. Will we see an easier version of solo play down the line?
Yeah, that was actually a tactical decision we made. You know, when you create a game, I mean, I remember way back when we was one of my first games I worked on was Advent Rising on the Xbox. I don't know if you guys remember that game.
Nice.
Right, way back when.
That's
right?
old.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we were the plan was, I mean, we were a first time developer, so right out of the box we're like, this game will do everything. It's gonna have amazing single player co-op. It's gonna have evolving weapon abilities, and it's gonna have a branching storyline, which is that even trying to get half of that done meant none of us slept for like 2 years getting that out the game. And you realize even just to balance a game to a certain type is a massive undertaking. I mean, it is a lot of work because the strength of the enemies, the strength of the weapons, the strength of what you do as a character, and how you want your skills to be rewarded as you're progressing through. They all play into that, and even the way you time the narrative elements. And so, it was a decision we made pretty early into the game that this is a co-op game, and we are going to put the lion's share of our effort towards that element, and even do parts of the game that encourage that way of playing. However, I tend to be sometimes I just like to solo my way through a game, and I get that, and I know that's a portion. I didn't want to make the game impossible that way, and so it was a decision that we as a team made. Like, it's going to be more challenging if you go into a co-op game and you say, screw everybody else, I'm going to do this as I'm going to be the hero of the day and go solo. It's going to be harder. That is a deliberate decision to make it harder. The belief was that for those that are able to make it through that brutality in the end, it will be celebrated. And it is something we've noticed on Reddit and everything else, is when you poor bastards get through the single player slog, it is something to pop some champagne about. It is a big deal, and that is part of the design. And I know there are people that are going to be cursing my name for that and cursing our team's decision on that. Yeah. But in the end, we simply did not have the time to be able to do both of them, and so we had to make a call. And that is one of the hard parts of game design, is even with a massive title like Call of Duty, you still got finite number of hands and finite number of hours in the day. So you've got to make calls like that, where you'll say, you know what, I think we've got to go one way or the other. And so I still think, I know it's caused some frustration for the people that are solely into doing that and maybe are more on the casual side. And I mean, that is I regret that. I wish we could do more in that direction, but we couldn't. And I think the result of having a single experience that is definitely more brutal and communally recognized as a harder deal, I think is a nice way of kind of fitting that work in, if that makes sense.
100%. I think that absolutely answers the question. And to follow up with that, Rizzo and many other people are curious about the notebook, and then that decision to get removed as well. So is that another one of those time restraints, and especially like 2 Easter eggs you'd have to create because they love the casual and the hardcore? Is it once again the time constraints? Yeah, and I need to remind everybody that was experimental, and that was something that we put it in. We're like, we need to see how that goes, and it caused a little bit of confusion in the community initially. There were people saying, "Oh wait, well, so if I got to the casual version, am I done? That's it. There's nothing else." And then little by little, people discovered what was there, and so we kind of had to look at risk reward there. One of our broader pictures, I told you we've got the kind of the overall what's going to be happening throughout the season plan, was that the first map was going to be
well, we hope an introduction to the sledgehammer style of doing this mode, and maybe even an introduction for people that have never played zombies before. I know we talked to a lot of people that their first zombie experience, whether it was through previous studios or then, was always like, okay, I get in and there's zombies, but I'm in this really small space, and they're dropping change on the floor, and what are these chalk outlines of guns on the wall? And there's a lot that was kind of assumed because we've got this already, elite group of players who come through and just want to devour this every year. And so that was behind the decision to do the prologue in Final Reich. It was the decision behind having narratively sound reasons behind these elements of gameplay. And it was the reason behind Notebook initially. Was okay, well, let's show them that there are elements that they can track and move through, but also have these Easter eggs that just pop up as kind of a primer to zombies mode. We got into Darkest Shore, and again, because of our restraints, we were like, okay, it's a known quantity that as we move into DLC season, the new player base kind of decrescendos, and this is more a case of either if anybody that we've converted over into the game style in Final Rank, or those that have already been, the loyal fans are going to be going through. So there was just less of a need for these the walkthrough stuff and the notebook stuff. And again, it's one of those calls you have to make with okay, if we've got X amount of resources and time, where do we go? And I know that there are folks that love the notebook. I actually love that too. I love the idea of for me, it's all narrative based. I'm like, well, of course, if you're going to be going in locked and loaded with the team on this mission, you're going to be keeping notes. You're going to have that mission sort of thing, and especially if there are mysteries to be solved, that will all be there. But yeah, that's something that had to move out of the process right there. Now, I know there were some questions about, in the future, would there be director's cut or anything like that? And not to jump into
no, please, sir.
Of course, I reviewed this before we went in. If we do that, we've already got the elements of those notebooks and everything that were generated and written up already, and so that looks like to be going in.
Ooh. That is very exciting news if it works out, of course. No promises.
Now I know you've teased before in the past, like the potential more survival maps coming to the game, and I think some people were expecting them to be in the Shadow Throne. There weren't any. Is this something that maybe the community could be looking forward to? More survival maps like Gross House?
That's the sort of thing I can't give any specifics on.
Yeah, please don't get in trouble. Yeah. Please don't.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble.
But what I can say is we were, the whole prologue element with Groston House there, we'd set that up, and it was a classic case of some of our designers were just, late one night, they're like, hey, let's just do Endless Spawn, see what that's like in Groston House. I'm like, oh, it's kind of fun. And I got a call at like 2 a.m. saying, dude, you got to pop on and try this. And it was really fun. But we were not expecting it to get the mad love that it has gotten. And it became a favorite. And there was something very much about it it feels a little more like World at War, those classic zombies being in that tiny space. And we're like, okay, we'd already done some things kind of as the homage to our predecessors in the game. And so that one felt right. But it was... for the amount of work that goes into a tiny little map like that compared to the reward of the cheers and adulations from hundreds of thousands, we're like, okay, so let's just say that's a lesson we learned, and it's not something we're going to be forgetting.
That's what I've said many times over. Like, the community really appreciates that. Like, with past developers, they have these really large maps that could easily be cordoned off into survival maps, and I feel like it wouldn't, like you just said, the amount of resources it would take towards how much enjoyment the players would get out of it. I feel like that's something people would really appreciate.
And so, it's it's still work. It's not like, oh, we just put up a wall right there and boom, we got it. It has to be attuned, and there's still where we'll if you get to round, anytime you open up, well, we've got to go infinite rounds on this, that's got to be tested. And that means we've got to, just get that that little section there and say, okay. And we've got some incredible testers that have skills like you wouldn't believe. And of course, we'll try turning on, the God mode and everything else. But you eventually want to see, like, how far can we go? Can we get to, round 100 in this tiny little map? And how brutal is the whistling response at that point? And so,
oh God,
it's work. Like, it's not something you snip off a door and away we go.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I have to ask, because I was pretty critical of DLC 1. I really like the launch map, and I really like Rossin House. DLC 1, I was very critical of that map. And I'm wondering why, because DLC 2, I was shocked how much I enjoyed it. Why is there such a huge disconnect in terms of how much there is in terms of gameplay, not in terms of story, because I'm more of a player in terms. Why is there such a disconnect with how much there is to do in DLC 2 as opposed to DLC 1? Because DLC 1 to me felt very, very barren in a lot of places, versus DLC 2 feels jam-packed with things to do for everyone.
Right. When by the time we got to DLC 2, I mean, I've mentioned this with Reed before. Our zombies team is actually the smaller crew in the studio, and in Final Reich, luckily we had 2 years to be building up these layers. By the time we got to Shadow of Throne, the single player team had been freed up, and so you guys have seen Sam Howell has been responding a lot. So we all of a sudden had some very talented hands on deck that could help to expand out what was there. So it was, I mean, what you're noticing, you're kind of feeling on a geek gamer level, is just evidence of us simply having a team that was essentially doubled at this point. So
that makes a lot of sense.
What I was worried about, to get those insights though, because when you go into it blind and you don't know what's behind it, it's a lot easier to be critical of it when you don't know the reasoning.
And I love the Darkest Shore. Like, for me, the Darkest Shore is a little bit more of a kind of surgically precise experiment with some elements of gameplay. We were able to, the Shadow Throne wouldn't work if we hadn't learned what we had through the Darkest Shore and what we were able to, the story we were able to tell with the Darkest Shore. But even in a kind of a grander sense, there should be more to do in Berlin, in this massive city, with all these different sides. And so I think while Berlin is that, there were a lot of experiments that had come to fruition. They were like, okay, cool. That means let's open up the gates on melee weapons. Let's open up, the gates on these little vignettes that are happening off to the side. Did we like what happened with the corpse gate on Darkest Shore? Do we want to shift in tone a little bit away from the, I don't know if you guys have noticed, we're a little less Saw now and a little more Indiana Jones.
Yes.
And we're gonna be moving that a lot more thematically as well.
Oh, cool. So, and just to caveat why I had that initial reaction, I thought you weren't going that way. I thought you were going, you should ask it now anyway with your exo zombies. Go ahead, go ask your exo zombie questions if you want to at this point.
Oh no.
Are you sure? You don't want to get it out of your system?
Did you have anything to do with exos at all?
That was exo was before my time. And so, there is at least on my end, very little that is a response to that stuff. However, a lot of the team still was there, and I've heard the occasional cheers and grumbles and whistles about what happened there. And so we're not entirely in a vacuum according to Exo Zombies, but I've made it and this is something that I think hits the center of a lot of the questions that I saw on Reddit, is that we really wanted to make a uniquely Sledgehammer version of this mode, with the DNA in our studio going back to Dead Space, going back to science fiction, going back to horror. Granted, it's a different type of game. In Dead Space, we had that space to tell a little more of a story that could meander and take its time. Whereas in a zombies mode, it's a race from the get-go, and and a lot of times in a single player game, well, you've got a time to say, hey, let's slow the player down here. Let's put some roadblocks up so they can stop and notice and see what's going on. You do that in a zombies game, and you'll be soundly cursed and escorted out of the building. In fact, even some of the places where we tried to do that and learned in Final Reich, we heard the response we got from you. And I don't know if you noticed, there are a lot less jump scares going on.
Yeah, the jump scares.
A lot less moments where you're pulled to the thing. And so, because in the end, it's got to be gameplay first. It's got to be what is fun, what feels right, what flows. After that has been, refined, that's where we try to bring in the elements of narrative and fun.
Was it daunting taking on the zombies mantle? Because the community can be both passionate, but at the same time ravenous. What was that like when the moment you realized, all right, I'm the creative director of zombies?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've worked on some daunting projects before. I like taking on a project where there's a fan base out there, where that their expectations, and it's always the biggest challenge is, where can you innovate, where can you change things up, and what will be like, oh, exciting and interesting, and what will be like, oh, damn, you've changed everything I love, and with zombies, it was a really tricky thing, because I saw what Lee had done, and I mean, he really kind of pushed some boundaries into the comedic, into the funny, and super clever. Love where he went with that. In fact, that I think would have been one of my instincts to go with this, but he had already so brilliantly covered the tongue-in-cheek with that. Of course, Treyarch's Zombies has its own very unique footprint as far as what they've done. But it seemed like, this is a place where Sledgehammer could really mark its territory. My own experience in writing science fiction meant it's hard for me to tell a story that is mystical without having some quantum physics tied in there somewhere, some element of this is the real story why that happened. Right. But we really wanted something that was entirely self-contained, something that felt, the minute you open up the Sledgehammer and Nazi Zombies, you're in that. And I know we've got some criticism for a similarity between the maps, and of course that was a deliberate choice. Is we want these to have that same feel. These are chapters in the same book, and whereas Lee and Blundell, some of their chapters are like, wow, here's a wild new change in color palette, a wild new change in this or that. We wanted to keep our cameras focused in a little bit more. It's a little bit more, at least initially, an intimate story of four soldiers thrown into something that has gone completely off the rocker. And that's what the best horror stories aren't about the monsters. It's about the people trying to survive, coming up against what's there. The Walking Dead is not about zombies.
Anymore.
You can pull the zombies out of The Walking Dead and turn it into a story about, I don't know, a plague of locusts, or a flood, or but it's about those characters. So that we wanted to have that. And so that means we're not going on wild junkets into sort of Tex Avery Technicolor backgrounds. Everything needs to look and feel like it is still in the shadowed corners of our World War II scenario there. So we still want to make it look different. We still want, you've got the snowy nighttime village of Middleburg. You've got the early morning foggy island, and then Berlin. One of our primary concerns was, okay, we want to make sure this doesn't feel like Middleburg, and while it's still only miles away from the location, and while it's still the same technology and everything else, the using that kind of pushing that film noir idea, and pushing what are the evils that happen in a city, what are the elements that happen when you have all this together, then on top of that, it's a city that has been in a chokehold from this regime, and it was a city that was divided even then. Not everybody was for what was happening there.
Absolutely.
And people reacted differently to the coming invasion. And there are tragic stories of people taking cyanide pills and walking out into the park and sitting on benches, and as the Russians rolled in, they found horrific elements of dead bodies waiting for them before they even got in there. And then to say, okay, we're placing our characters who've already been through so much hell right in the middle of that, and of course the undead horrors moving across it. We wanted to evoke that, and it looks like the community has really responded well to that. So
I'd say so, because we see our characters clearly having that type of arc now, and they're starting and it's kind of commonplace, as awful as it is, but traumatic events cause bonding experiences between people.
Right.
So what we're seeing, like you said already, with the cracks on our characters early on, and then in the next map, like, oh, well, we really knew why Marie was here, but they're getting on the same page of like, we're in it now.
Yeah.
We're in the thick of it, so let's make the best of this. Do you want to take us through some of these design mechanics, like to put us on the blimp, even narrative speaking, to kill off Dr. Straub? You don't give away stuff that gets you in trouble. That's not fun to spoil things. But like, this was really something to me that I've been dying for years. And if the Rise and Treyarch played with jumping back in time and you seeing like characters and cutscenes and this type of stuff, but this is like classic gaming. Me and John were talking about previously, like Sly Cooper's games, going on to the Arpeggio and even BioShock Infinite, and it's just like these mechanics can translate so well into zombies in this narrative experience, even with prologue. Like there, I see that could be a zombie campaign. If you guys had resources, oh man, would I love to see a whole story like that. But obviously, that's not how the game mode is, and that's not what Call of Duty Zombies is at this point. So take us through the whole like blimp part, at least of the Easter egg in that design.
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of this was when we made the decision. Okay, this is the bombing of. We don't have a whole lot of space and time to be telling a lot of story. Like things are closing down, the shutting, and so we had to make the decision, like, how are our characters, like, if this was a real mission and they were rescued on Heligoland and took a boat back to the States, what would happen most likely is, the commanding officer would say, good job, you guys get rested up. The Allies will have this. We're sweeping things up already and we're done here. And there would be all sorts of, hospital time and psychological evaluations after this sort of thing. So like, we've got to keep them in the shit, and then moving Straub into that, I wanted to, even though we're doing kind of a serialized story here, I didn't want to make it too, well, that rascally Straub got away again.
That's what I remember. We talked about this.
Off again.
We talked about this on Zombroz months ago, where we were worried it was going to fall into the trap of like your princess is in another castle, like it's Super Mario. And that's why, like, me and Reed, we love the bold move to kill Straub off. And spoilers to anybody who hasn't done the Easter egg.
Well, because I mean, and you guys have gotten these hints. This is not. There's more than just Straub's plans here. There's more than just tactics here. And I've been, hinting like this for quite a while. That if you get in and read and figure out what the zombies are saying, not one of them has said his name at all. Not one of them is mentioning the Nazis at all. There's something deeper and darker going on. There's a reason that the Sword of Barbarossa is not in one piece, and was pulled apart a long time ago. And this gets back to something we were talking about earlier, studying the history of Frederick Barbarossa. It's a fascinating story of this, back in a day and age when, most people still got old and died by their mid-30s. This guy had this incredible story of being a moderately successful duke in Germany, and then he goes on this crusade with the king of Germany, and then begins this meteoric rise to king of Germany, Holy Roman Emperor, and an emperor that conquers place after place, and has this obsession with the Crusades, so. Again, the best way to tell these stories is, okay, this is what we know. Where are these, kind of creative lead points, these creative spots that we don't quite know what happened or why this happened? And there are all sorts of theories. I mean, you look up the hows and the whys of how Barbarossa became what he became, and there are no two
historians that are going to agree on exactly on what happened. So we're like, okay, guess what we get to do? We're going to say he came across this sword, and why is the sword not mentioned? Why is this not in any of the histories? Well, looks like there's been a group that has been deliberately wiping out those elements of history and deliberately hiding this stuff.
I love that.
And you guys, there's so many
it's a power too great
in the history too, where I'm like, you know what, this battle that he just won, if the records actually said that he was there and was raising his soldiers with the touch of his sword, and that's how he turned around what looked like it was going to be a rout and turned it around and won this, that there's a lot there. And I'm just there. I'm hoping at some point, once we get all these games on the books, we can do some appendices about this sort of thing. But look into, and I know some of you guys have the battles that were fought, and ask yourself the question: would the mystery of this battle be answered better by the fact that you've got a general who is summoning troops that you thought were down for the count?
Interesting.
You've just made my nights a lot busier.
Well, and because this sort of, you got to remember, these wars were long before we had the machines of war were interesting. This is not battles were won not by how many tanks and guns and ships do we have, but literally how many hands do we have on board. And so they were the single biggest asset that a warlord had, were the number of troops, and nobody ever asked, okay, but were they smart troops? Were they troops that were good with the bow and arrow? And granted, these weapons would make a difference, but in the end, the guy with 10,000 warriors versus the guy with 2,000 warriors is a given conclusion, right?
Right.
And oftentimes, because just the vision of thousands of warriors coming over the hill would make your troops drop their weapons and run. And so again, a lot of this thought was kind of put into how this would be there, and this is true in just about any game. And I mean, you actually see elements of this in Overwatch as well. So much story and so much thought and so much pre-game development has been put into characters that all we get are like the little rays of light that kind of slip through when we're not developing the game. But the richness of those rays is really evidence towards what kind of thought went through on that. And luckily we're getting to do a little bit more of that. In fact, there's always so much story I want to tell. And so I finally was like, you know what, some of my notes that I'm taking for these story elements, I'm just going to put some sketches in them and make these from Drosten, and we'll just drop these, because there's no way we're going to get this through, through our lokes and everything else in our process in the game.
Is that why you keep releasing them on Twitter? Because that's the big thing. It's just like, we want them in our dossier inside the game.
Yeah, we were wondering that. Why are they in Twitter, not in the game?
So this idea of eventually getting a book that's going to have more of these elements, that's what we'd like to do with this. Because I love the idea of being self-contained. That being said, the concept of, I know there's a buzzword of transmedia, of developing out a story behind an IP and having it available in different aspects on social media or a blog. That is incredibly appealing to me. I did a project while I was at Blizzard for StarCraft II: Heart of the Swarm. And if you guys look up Project Blackstone, it was an attempt to get people reinvested in the story, and we had characters that we built entirely on Twitter, and we used Twitter as their means of communicating with each other. We put out a projectblackstone.com was originally a website that we had password protected, and I used hexadecimal coding to hide the code in the front of the page. So we had our fans going in, cracking that password, jumping in. They jumped into the site, and it was an email inbox of a xenobiologist who had been co-opted by the Dominion government, and the fans themselves got to kind of unravel the story and sleuth their way into what was going on. We had a bunch of short stories written behind that, and so that would not have worked if it was all just on the disc. There's something about being immersed in an imaginative universe and feeling like, you know what, if I hop on Twitter, I get this part of the story, and maybe a blog is the best way to tell this part of the story. Like, I love the tool we've got of this Enigma machine with codes that feels a little more governmental.
and I like that it's accessible. You could be on your, phone and, a class or whatever, and be like, I'm going to leaf through a little bit of this, and I think some of those things fit better and rest better in that format rather than the game. Now, that being said, it would be cool if they were accessible on some degree in the game as well.
Right. Just to connect the dots a little bit.
Do you ever worry sometimes that maybe you're missing out on people that didn't even think to check your Twitter?
The Venn diagram of people who play Nazi zombies and people who have the internet and people who are on Twitter is kind of one circle. It's so we might be, but I think if you saw the numbers we've got from people who are interested in storytelling through that other aspect, it actually opens up more of an audience than it does excluding other
this is the internal number debate we talked about. It's like we can make these speculations, but if it's like it's still spot on, how many concurrent players are playing World War II, and if that's all that's online right now, and then that's all that's watching the videos, it's like, well, they're not missing out on anything.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
okay.
And I wanted to make sure, and this is the fine line. How much of this story is vital for gameplay, and how much of the story is for those that are interested enough to go in and dig through to find that. And there's a sense of, the whole concept behind an Easter egg is, do I care enough about this to dig further, to go run up against every flat surface in the game and hit X, and to, there's a little bit of work that goes in behind this, and I think it's more rewarding if you feel like, hey, I sleuthed this out, I figured this out, I went and I read this, and I got the I dug through these letters from Drosten, and I there's actually a code hidden in here, and there's a pattern on this, because the minute, this is one of the secrets of transmedia. The minute you are on Twitter or you're leafing through Drosten's pages, you're already playing our game.
Gotcha.
Even if you don't have it loaded up, you're in our universe. Yeah. And so it is that kind of immersion into our imagination that for me is the win. Even if it doesn't directly equal amount of time with the CD in your Xbox.
Sure. To your point there, I remember as a child, I would take the strategy guides to school at lunch. I'd be flipping through Kingdom Hearts' strategy guide or BioShock 2. I remember that very fondly because it was just like, man, I want to go home and now try out these things.
Those strategy guides were the best sometimes. Like, you get the big fat book and you just leaf through them.
And how many times did you played a game so much, you went to bed and you were fighting those battles in your mind?
Yes.
That is a shared real estate for a creator. And I for me, this is a sign of my age. I remember when the Star Wars movies first came out, and they had Happy Meals that were Star Wars themed, and they would come with a little album, a little LP you could put on, and a little picture book, and you could go. This is the first time I learned about Kashyyyk, the planet that the Wookiees came from, right? And of course, as a kid, you're like, well, of course, this world all exists, and somebody has this consistent idea that they're keeping there. And I really think that Lucas and Lucasfilm were the first to do this idea of consistent creative direction and consistent world building. And so I could get the Happy Meal story about the Wookiees, and it still felt like it fit in the story of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, and it gives the sense of kind of this world that is consistent, and it's percolating in other corners of existence. Even when you're not playing the game, this world is still there on some degree. And it's funny, I don't know if you guys have seen Ready Player One.
Not yet.
I
read
definitely explores similar ideas along those lines. A lot of my own writing has gone into that. So this is what just entirely fascinates me, and this is why we're probably going to have elements of Nazi zombies that do live in their own places outside of the disc.
That makes sense. Does that, what you just described, is that the reason you've published 13 novels? Was that like the start of you getting obsessed with writing and all the mythos of worlds and all that?
Yeah, I think I think most game designers, if you talk, really get to them, they are storytellers, right? And games are one language you can tell stories in, illustration, art. I majored in animation. It's another fantastic way of telling stories. And sometimes those stories just take wing, best on the printed page. And sometimes it's the challenge of telling a story where your audience is your protagonist is addictive and fascinating. And that's what games are, where it's like, okay, I can't control where these players are going to go, and they might go off and bump into every flat surface on the game, and that is not going to make any sense narratively, but I want to create a world where they might actually do that and it would make sense, so and that was a lot of why we had Klaus stuck in Middleburg for years, and he's an engineer, and so he's hiding things, and and you guys noticed he had his little Jack in the Box metal stamp that he kind of left around there, and so we're like, okay, there's actually a narrative reason why you might spend half an hour looking at the pattern of bricks on a wall. There might be something in there.
I never thought about that, like writing the player's intuition into the
that's
of the
really
character.
Good. That's really good. I mean, doesn't that show up in the bunker in multiplayer's headquarters as Klaus's stamp all over those walls?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God. All right. How about what a lot of people, and even some of the criticisms I've had, is the power-ups, the mods, the creative class slots. Once again, is this getting into our problem of just, it's a small team. We can't add more of these things for the future DLCs.
Right. And a lot of it too, we really like the flow and the gameplay that we've established with these elements, with these power-ups. And so it comes down to that kind of cost-benefit analysis of, well, what if we play with this new type of zombie? Like the Moichler was something like, oh, we love how that just drives that push through the fog and everything else. In this case, we decided we really wanted to mess with kiting, and we really wanted to mess with, well, okay, I'm going to just run this train of zombies around infinitely. Okay, well, what if Strava's blasting them into being faster than you from a Zeppelin every once in a while? And again, don't take this the wrong way, but we were just laughing and cheering from the sideline as one train after another just bit the dust, and because we're like, it worked, and
sometimes it takes you a moment to realize they're faster.
We don't want to break things. We don't want to make it impossible to do that stuff, but it's almost like the whole audience is learning and training and getting better together, and so we're like, we think we can roll with this. We think they can, and obviously they did, and you did. So we have some more plans for different for changes in what you mentioned.
Don't get in trouble.
That is a known thing, and we've been deliberately experimenting with what we thought would have the most effect. But I can safely say this: we have got some big changes coming down the pipe for gameplay and style and everything, because it's something that trying to get a read for the flow of the franchise and the flow of the audience. We feel like we've proven that we can do an interesting mystery. We can do an interesting story told through these epic, bigger maps. And so where can we flex our creative muscles a little bit more down the book? And I don't want to distract from some of the experiments we've done with Berlin right now, but there's a lot of very exciting and innovative stuff coming down the pipe.
Well, at least Sledgehammer Studio has already shown that on the opposite side with multiplayer, because they did a complete overhaul of the class system, and that completely has changed how the game is functioning. I mean, I play quite a bit of multiplayer as well, and I was playing it again today, and I was very, very shocked at how differently the game plays now, and it's interesting to see that evolution. So a little
more player agency, a little more player ability with getting who they want and how to play.
Absolutely.
And that is one of the most exciting things about just game design in general, especially doing it right now, is we don't finish a game and put it on a box, up on the shelf at Walmart, and then wipe our hands up and say, okay, well, hopefully this works. It's a lot more like live theater, where we're in and we're listening to the audience, and we're like, you know what, that joke has just fallen flat every time. We're gonna throw in a banana peel here, or we're gonna throw in this or that element. We can be more responsive to the audience, and the multiplayer team has done an exceptional job this last little bit, and have done a great job working with us on saying, okay, what have we learned? Because there are some similar lessons that you get from both modes of the game.
That makes sense. I noticed you added the supplies tab to zombies, and the mail officer and the quartermaster and the good old order stuff. So once again, good. Just want to tell you, good. Keep it up.
Yeah. No, and that was a hard decision. We've been talking about getting orders and contracts available with this DLC. There were a few bits of polish, and I think we've kind of responded to that one already. I also like how that hasn't, it's allowed everybody to focus in on the Easter eggs for this first little bit. Orders and contracts are coming through shortly. They're a lot of fun. It's the sort of thing we've been wanting to have in for a while, but it now gives that sense of progression, and every hour you spend in on this game will have something very deliberate and changing and productive, I guess, for going through.
Well, that sounds good, because that's their complaint of where's the replayability in this game, especially the solo players that get very upset about this and very critical that the game mode doesn't have them playing to God knows what rounds for whatever reason.
Right. And we, just want to let you know, very aware of that. We want to make sure
to hear
that movement through and that progress feels rewarding, prestiging, needs to feel more rewarding, and those are elements that we're going to be responding to over the next little bit. So
fantastic. So let's get back a little bit to the blimp and killing off Straub. What was it like to make that sequence, and the decision process to do that in such a way, almost like an in-game cutscene, seeing our antagonist, just what a grisly death right there, brutal in front of our faces.
Well, we've talked a little bit about the zombie theme as a metaphor for the atrocities of World War II. And Dr. Straub is very much the kind of the incarnation of a lot of the evil thought that went into what happened here. And so so there's a little bit of I'll be honest, of a very kind of pituitary fitting end rage response to how he goes down. I mean, that is not a slow death, and that is not a painless death. And we've played with some elements. I don't know if you noticed in some of the early videos we got of Straub, he kind of scratches at his neck, and you'll see on some of his elements he's got some scars there. I mean, this is a man who has been fascinated by pain in every way, shape, and form since before he got into his profession. And what that and obviously there is very little that can disturb or bother him. He's carrying what used to be the head of his one-time ally on his head, just so he can torture him again and again on this gate. And for this person, how do you give what feels like a fitting end and a satisfactory end? It's we thought, well, why not have the one thing he is most proud of, what he most considers his grand work, be his undoing.
That's a good classic. Oh, that's a classic. It's like, I love it thematically.
So there's not a whole lot of complex going on right there. It's just like, okay, this is what needs to happen. And we didn't want the hokey, like, oh, he falls off into the fog, and so maybe he survived. Like, no, he is ripped into little handfuls by angry zombies. And there's no, we're not pulling any shenanigans on this one. He is
nice.
Now being chewed apart and pulled apart, and is in now tiny little snowball-sized pieces all over the blimp. So
it's no Walking Dead. He didn't roll under a dumpster like Glenn.
Exactly.
God.
Exactly. And I think again, this is a lot we've seen in Game of Thrones. We've seen a little bit of Walking Dead as well. Is when the audience knows people can die, and when they die, it changes things. Then that makes a story a little more interesting, a little more scary. Like, nobody is too precious in our story that they're guaranteed to survive or guaranteed to be in the next
in the next installment. And here's the other thing we're going to see. I haven't seen anybody asking this question, but I mean, yeah, awesome that the Nazis just lost this brilliant mind. But what does that mean when the one guy who was controlling this situation, the one guy who knew how it worked?
Yes, sir.
And that's the question.
We've been talking. Me and John have been talking about that.
Good. Because this might not all go well. This might not all be, something that we've got a complete hold over. Now, granted, yeah, you make the logical assumption that to some degree, Straub has been instructing those around him, and obviously, if they're dropping blitz machines and these gun buys into the city, there is a chain of command, and the idea that the electroschnells and the elements that our four heroes have picked up were invented for the Nazi officers that are meant to be controlling the undead. And so it's not like, he was the one puppet master controlling the string. However, knowing Straub and his egomania, and there were obviously some things that he kept to himself. He's got his electroschnell was attuned for. I've seen this question a lot. The confrontation with Straub and the other maps, is that canon?
Oh yes.
So he had created his own personal field of Geistcraft that repelled bullets. that kept him from being hurt like this. Haven't you guys ever read Dune? It's one of my favorite.
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys
got all the way
how
through
those
Dune,
shields work in Dune? So they repel anything fast. They repel a ballistic.
So it's just like a Forever War. Did you ever read that
and
book
that's
too?
why they use daggers. Because the dagger the slow blade penetrates the shield. I think that's one of the terms there. And so by making himself invulnerable to bullets, pretty much the only thing that could take him down were the hungry claws.
Slow rip of a zombie.
That makes
your
perfect
flesh
sense.
Apart. Yeah. Because we would see them. We're like, is he actually there?
Yeah.
Because the bullets
and I've seen there's a lot of. Is it a hallucination?
Hallucination.
I love
ghost?
Oh, that's perfect.
Some people are going full on like Memento, and then.
You had me thinking maybe he's already dead.
Yeah.
I saw that. I've seen some people saying this.
That was interesting.
An illusion or a dream or something. That was him. This is his place. How is he so easily walking in amongst the undead? Well, he's made sure that he's attuned this energy to give him, and that's essentially what you reverse, what you turn around on him on the blimp. So.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
That's
so good.
For the people who are out there hunting these little story details, I think, at least from my perspective, now's the time to start looking into like the greater evil behind all of it. And I think probably the key to that would be the zombies' language, as you've mentioned. Do you have any hints or directions or tips to anybody trying to crack that?
So that's the funny thing. I was positive that sucker would be cracked halfway through the Final Reich, and because there's some pretty straightforward rules to that, and I have given more than I had planned on giving for that. I think it's interesting. The zombies community has this hyper focus on where can I click in the map, and what are the clues, and what can I shoot, and everything is focused on what's on disc. And we've got, and the language isn't the only one, because we've got a couple mysteries that are a little more meta, that are going to require a piece of paper and some thought, and I think people are finally seeing that. We're seeing some on-roads for a translation and stuff like that. But that's not one you're going to solve by hitting X in the right place. That's going to require a little bit of linguistics and a little bit of kind of study of what's going on there. So
that's exciting.
And and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Fair enough.
Good.
I thought I'd just ask, because I've sat down before and I've listened to those quotes. I've transcribed the letters. I've tried to see if I can find German words in them. And I speak a bit of German, so sometimes it clicks with me, but I'm hitting brick walls, man.
Yeah.
Brick walls.
It's deliberately, and we had played with the idea of including, you can turn on and off the subtitles, and including the subtitle of the zombies right there. I was like, you know what? Let's make this is going to be one of the hard ones. This is going to be one of the ones, and it's going to require a little bit of creativity on your side, a little bit of like, okay, this could be this word or that word. Let's see what makes sense. So,
right on.
Yeah.
I love
Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. Is there any big lasting impressions you want people to leave with this DLC? What is something you're really hoping players get out of the Shadow Throne?
This is, I've expressed this before, I think on Twitter as well. This is the last part of our chapter where we're hiding. This is the last part of the chapter where we are in the shadows of history, as I've said before. This is where we're going to step out into a drastically changed world, a drastically changed universe. And it's going to be, things are going to get really big after this. This has gone from, it's more than just a change in where we're existing in history. It's a change in the type of story that we're telling. We're shifting away from four soldiers that have stumbled across something into a much bigger piece of the pie. And it's something we've hinted at before. The characters that we've released, the special characters that we've unlocked, those aren't just like accidental. There are narrative conclusions you can come to from some of their names. There's a reason why we've tagged their location, their nationality, and what they're geared up in, and what does that mean to a story.
I love it. I think that's a wonderful one to conclude on right there. That is absolutely fantastic. I feel like even in the outro, you can get that sense of when they were being completely surrounded by the zombies of just what's coming on the horizon and what you can experience in DLC 2. War Machine, available now on PlayStation. It's not an ad, but just in case you want to go play it.
Download the map.
Shadow Throne. This is, and it comes out, I think, in a little less than a month from now for PC and Xbox.
Yep.
Very, very exciting. Well, Cameron, thank you so much for being on. This has been absolutely wonderful, and I think the community is going to absolutely eat this up. Do you guys have any lasting thoughts or questions before we wrap?
No, Cameron, thank you for coming on the show. It's been such a treat. It's very.
You know what? Thank you for the invitation. We just, we follow you guys. We love the analysis you bring. I love that you bring a little bit of the scholarly into what's going on and a little bit of the other analysis because we're deliberately putting those layers in. So fun to see that getting savored, as well as just the awesome, shooting zombies' heads off their bodies. So thank you so much for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And tune in next week. We'll probably have the guys that did the Easter egg and solved it first, Starburst and Smart Guy on. So look forward to that. And I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week. And we'll see you on the next Zombroz. Bye.